Hi, this is Dr. Michael Bogart, and I will be your instructor for this video series on world religions. And I look forward to presenting this fascinating subject of world religions to you in this series. I hope that you'll not only learn a lot, but that you'll find yourself intrigued by the amazing kaleidoscope of world religions that we're going to be looking at. The topic for this first video in several segments is what is the best way to learn about world religions? Before we jump into this topic, I want to personally welcome each and every one of you. Now, some of you may be watching this series as part of one of the classes that I teach. Others may have just stumbled onto this series sort of browsing YouTube or some other video posting site. Either way, welcome. We're going to learn a lot during our time together. I think some things that you would expect to learn, while other things you may think are quite surprising. So welcome aboard. Let's get started. Okay, let's begin by naming some of the issues that anyone faces when studying the religions of the world. For example, issue number one, kind of a primary issue here. Is there a God? Well, there's some pretty convincing arguments that a supreme creator does exist, and there are some pretty tough arguments against his existence. Theologians have attempted to provide proofs for his existence, but in the end, each proof seems to be lacking in some way. And whether or not you believe in God comes down simply to a basic philosophical decision that you must make. Since we don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt, we must make a leap of faith. So if belief in God's existence is a positive leap of faith, then it must follow that belief in God not existing is also a leap of faith, maybe a negative faith. But here's the practical result. If you say yes to the existence of a supreme creator, then a logical worldview tends to follow that. There can be absolute values. Things that are just always true and right because the creator designed the universe in that way. To you, the world and life tends to be God-centered and understood from at least fundamentally from a divine point of view. If you say no to the existence of a supreme creator, then a logical worldview also follows. There can only be relative values, personal values, variable values, values negotiated by a society as a whole. Why is this? Because there is no author of permanent, eternal truths and morality. The world and life tend to be human-centered and understood from a human point of view purely. And this series won't attempt to prove either way conclusively, but we cannot go further without at least raising the basic issue of God's existence. An interesting question to consider along this line of thinking is where you think our society is moving on that question. Worth considering. Well, issue number two. The second issue is biases. The obvious truth is that everyone is biased in some way concerning religion. Some are more biased than others, but all of us have preconceived notions about religion and religious groups. So that leads to another important question. Is it possible to study religion objectively, without biases? And how can we fairly compare one religion with another? Maybe the best way is simply to admit bias from the beginning and then aim for an open mind that keeps our own religious views and commitments while committing ourselves to honestly study the religions of the world in a way that potentially at least can correct some of the biases and misconceptions. A related question has to do with the many people in our world who are non-religious or anti-religious even. Can a person with that kind of commitment sympathize adequately with the point that religion and religious people make, which is, can you truly understand our experience if you don't believe it's worth anything or if you don't believe it's true? Issue number three is the role of human reason in religious studies. Religious people tell us that the human mind may not be the best tool to understand spiritual things. So can we fully trust our rational abilities in the very realm where religion tells us that the mind may have only a feeble grasp on the things that are going on in that realm? So here's what we're going to do in this video series. We cannot directly offer you a spiritual experience, so we're going to have to rely on what sense our minds can make of this intriguing phenomenon. The best we can do is to offer you the opportunity to seek the spiritual in ways that make sense in your own life during our time of study. Issue number four in this short video involves some basic definitions of important terms that we'll be using. You may want to write these down as a tried and true learning device. Taking notes is pretty good. So there's several of them. First is ultimate value, which is a primary source of meaning and purpose in life of an individual or a group, an interchangeable foundation stone of a person's worldview. Ultimate values come from ultimate reality, which has these characteristics. It's primary. Ultimate reality is primary. These are truths or principles that are so basic for making sense of life that they're not derived from anything else. They're just obvious. Then there's pervasiveness. These are principles, ultimate values, ultimate reality are principles that guide the entire whole of life. Then there's the concept of holiness. Holiness is an experience of awe or wonder or love in response to the amazing, wonderful, or unexplained things that we see in life. There's symbolic expression. Symbolic expression of ultimate reality is focused through concrete ideas, experiences, and objects, such as symbols. There are cult and culture. Ultimate values are celebrated in ritual and sacred story, but it's also lived out in personal behavior and through cultural and moral codes. Let's talk about faith. There are three senses that we will use the term faith in this series. A person's commitment to an ultimate value, in other words, your personal faith that something is true. Then there's the system of symbols expressing the ultimate value, which means that that's the religious group or that's the group that has the faith. And then there are the propositional elements of the symbol system, in other words, the specific beliefs and doctrines of the religious group. And all of those can be called the faith or faith. Transcendence is the ability of the human self-consciousness to push beyond self and senses, to ask questions of ultimate value, ask questions about the meaning of life and the origins of reality. That's transcendence. So religion is a holy symbol system. It's the human response to transcendence. Okay, that's all we have time for in this first little piece of the introductory video. In the next little clip within this first learning topic, we'll be looking at the tools in our toolbox and the controversial question of how religion came to be such a universal part of human experience. We'll see you then.